Our previous screencasts and lessons have looked at modern approaches to criminal profiling. We're now going to just take a look at a historical approach to offender profiling, spearheaded by a man called Lombroso. And although, as you will see as we go through this, there are a number of issues with his approach to offender profiling, he is often credited with being one of the first people to think about profiling offenders. Now, Lombroso believed that criminals were what he termed genetic throwbacks. So these are people who are essentially not as evolved as the rest of us. And he came up with the idea that you could tell one of these criminals simply by looking at their physical characteristics. So he carried out some research on 3,839 living Italian criminals and 383 dead Italian criminals, where he looked at their skulls and he looked at their facial features, and he categorized them to pick out the key features, the key physical characteristics that a criminal would show, and he called these atavistic features. So according to Lombroso's theory, the atavistic features which a criminal would show would be a narrow sloping brow, a strong prominent jaw, facial asymmetry, so that's when the face is not symmetrical, and high cheekbones, and that they would also have dark skin and extra digits, so that's extra fingers or extra toes. Lombroso even went so far as to identify various physical types. So, for example, a murderer, he said, would have bloodshot eyes, long ears and curly hair. A sexual deviant would have fleshy lips, a glinting eye and protruding ears. And a fraudster would have thin lips. Now, Lombroso accepted the fact that you couldn't account for all crimes using these atavistic features. So he did acknowledge the role of the environment, and he eventually separated criminals into three different classes. So the first ones were born criminals. These were those who had the atavistic features we've just been through. Then there were insane criminals. These were people who had mental health issues. And finally, criminaloids. And these accounted for a large proportion of the criminal population and were people who would be predisposed to crime if they were given the right negative environmental features. So you can read more about Lombroso's research and atavistic features in the pre-reading. Make sure before you come into the lesson you can describe Lombroso's research into the criminal form. You can explain Lombroso's theory on offender profiling and give examples of the atavistic features which he said were associated with criminals. And lastly, that you can describe the three types of criminals that Lombroso came to acknowledge.